This story, which at first glance may seem like an ordinary tragedy, actually happened to a person with a kind heart. The victim of a brutal killer was a caring, strong-spirited, and compassionate woman who worked at a veterinary clinic, a place where these qualities are extremely valuable. However, the circumstances of her death turned out to be highly mysterious, and the tangle of lies and falsehoods that the investigators had to unravel became an even greater surprise. The bright image of the doctor turned out to be far from flawless. Christina Parcel, a 40-year-old veterinarian, worked at a clinic located in the small town of Greer, South Carolina, with a population of about 35,000 people. Colleagues described her as an outstanding individual, the best specialist in her department, an experienced veterinarian capable of creating a calm atmosphere for any animal. Christina possessed a wonderful sense of humor, which helped smooth over even the most tense moments at work. Colleagues treated her with respect, and the management encouraged the talented specialist in every possible way. Christina had a young daughter, whom she raised together with the girl's father, John Mello, but only in the first years of the child's life. Friends and acquaintances unanimously claimed that the daughter was everything to the loving mother, but the child's biological father did not share this opinion. Soon after the birth of their daughter, the woman divorced her husband, and they had joint custody of the girl. Christina was engaged to a new lover named Bradley. Despite the apparent idyll, after the divorce from her ex-husband, the woman was involved in legal disputes over her daughter. Her ex-husband, John Mello, was a music producer who lived on the West Coast before moving to Greer. It is unknown under what circumstances they met and how long they dated before the birth of their daughter, but the confrontation between the parents over custody of the child was fierce. Back in 2016, on October 5, 2021, when the girl was visiting her father, he took her and flew to Italy. The mother was furious with this act and filed a complaint against him for violating the custody arrangement. This further aggravated the relationship between the former spouses. The woman even launched a campaign on the GoFundMe platform, collecting donations to pay for her lawyer's services. Many people sympathized with her and provided financial support. On October 13, 2021, Christina's fiancé, 65-year-old Bradley Post, called her in the morning, but she did not answer. After that, numerous attempts were made to contact her, but all of them proved futile. Then the man headed to Christina's house, knocked on the door, but no one opened it. Walking around the house, the fiancé went inside through the back door and saw a terrible picture. The woman's body, strewn with rose petals, was lying on the floor in the living room. His fiancée had become a victim of a brutal attack and showed no signs of life. Bradley immediately called the 911 emergency service, but it was too late to save Christina. Police found more than 30 stab wounds on her body, mostly in the head, face, and neck area. There was chaos all around, resembling a mess, but it did not match the typical picture of a robbery. Law enforcement officers found unusual items in the house associated with mystical practices. It seemed as if some madman had conducted a sacrificial ritual here. Therefore, the investigators began to consider the version of a ritual murder. During the inspection of the crime scene, forensic experts concluded that the woman was not killed in the place where the body was found. Throughout the house, traces of dragging were found, as well as signs that in some places the body was left and given various poses. This could have been done for photography or acts. After the body was dragged into the living room, it was covered with rose petals. Petals were also scattered in the places where the body was dragged. When information about the incident got into the press, journalists dubbed this crime the Rose Petal Murder. It is known by this name to this day. The police did not find any signs of breaking into the house. However, Bradley, who called the rescue service, told detectives that he entered through the back door, which always remained unlocked. Therefore, the criminal could easily get into the house the same way. However, this suggested that he may have been an acquaintance of the woman, since this information was not known to outsiders. Or he was just lucky to come across an unlocked door. At the crime scene, detectives found numerous signs of staging. This greatly complicated the investigation, as it was necessary to unravel a multitude of unrelated and contradictory evidence, discard the unnecessary, and get on the right track. Detectives had never encountered such confusing murder cases before and could not even decide which version to follow. However, investigators suggested that the murder was not accidental. The perpetrator purposefully came to Christina's house to commit this crime. Now the detectives had to find out what motive he had and who he was. Memory cards and a laptop were found in the house, standing in the living room next to the body. A transparent package with a potent banned substance was also found there, with small drops of dried blood on it. The victim's mobile phone was lying next to her body. In the hallway, a bag was found containing 2 white envelopes, each containing $500 in cash. A firearm was also found, hidden in a suitcase. It turned out to be a single-shot pistol for self-defense. In addition, numerous documents were found related to the custody court case over the daughter. Therefore, detectives considered the version of the ex-husband's involvement in the crime. Using luminol, a substance that allows detecting even the smallest traces of blood, forensic experts thoroughly examined the entire house. In several places, they found hundreds of miniature stains, indicating the extreme brutality of the attack. Before dying, the woman suffered a great loss of blood and unbearable pain. During this terrible massacre, she received 31 stab wounds. To find at least some clues, the police examined Christina's mobile phone. First of all, detectives sought to find out whether the victim's fiancé, who discovered the body, could be involved in the attack. To compare the information, investigators also took the man's mobile phone to analyze its contents. Bradley's behavior seemed suspicious to the police. The murdered woman's fiancé was extremely anxious, but it did not resemble the worries of a loving man who had lost his beloved. He was trembling, got confused in his testimony, and did not take off his gloves throughout the entire communication with the investigators. This only increased the suspicions of law enforcement officers, and, as it turned out later, not without reason. Analyzing the couple's gadgets, the police came across extremely provocative facts from Bradley's life, which immediately explained the reason for his nervousness. There were strong reasons to believe that the man used the woman's daughter to create explicit materials. In February and August, he made recordings and photographs in which the girl posed naked in various indecent poses. All this was found on the information carriers, phone, and laptop seized from the man for examination. However, it remained unclear whether this was done with Christina's consent or not. Doubts about this intensified when the police discovered new but alarming data. Studying the materials from the man's laptop and delving into the shocking details of Christina and Bradley's life, law enforcement officers found increasingly disgusting things. The focus was on a new category of victims, animals. Several recordings and photographs were found in which the partners had sex with animals, particularly with dogs. Amazingly, one of the best veterinarians at the clinic, who sometimes took animals home for temporary care, did this to engage in indecent acts with them. According to state law, such crimes are punishable by imprisonment for up to 5 years. In addition, the offender is obliged to pay a fine of at least $500, which can be increased at the court's discretion. Representatives of law enforcement agencies stated that these records are among the most disgusting materials they have ever had to see. All the discovered materials involving the daughter and dogs caused outrage among the public, who were shocked that a sweet, kind woman from a veterinary clinic suffered from such After discovering all these materials, Bradley Post was arrested. This happened on October 19, 2021, when he was charged with exploitation of a minor and distribution of relevant materials. As it turned out, he not only took photos and videos but also sold them. In addition, the police seriously considered the version of the fiancé's involvement in the death of his beloved, but he categorically denied his participation in this. Detectives had no evidence of his involvement in the murder. No traces of blood were found on his body or clothing, which would hardly be possible if he had inflicted such a number of knife wounds. Moreover, the woman's death occurred several hours before he entered the house, so the police doubted that he had anything to do with the murder. Apart from the ex-husband, there were no other suspects. In his favor was the main motive, custody of the daughter, which he did not want to share with Christina, which is quite often the reason for murder. However, at the time of the crime, he was with his daughter in Italy, and this information was easy to verify since he had not returned to the country. Nevertheless, John remained on the investigators' list as a person who could not be completely ruled out, because he could have acted through someone else's hands. The victim's ex-husband, John Mello, returned to the country on October 21, 2021, just a week after Christina's murder. Immediately after that, the police received a warrant for his detention. To pick up his things from the airport and buy certain medications that the man could not take due to the flight, he turned to his best friend, 29-year-old Zack Hughes, for help. This guy seemed suspicious to the detectives, so they began to study information about him in more detail. Zack was born and raised in the city of Morro Bay, California. A turning point for him came in 2005 when his parents decided to go on a trip for a vacation. After this trip across half the country, they adopted 5 children from Russia. All these children suffered from cruel treatment in their foster families, so they had physical and psychological traumas. The purpose of adopting the children was to instill moral values in Zack and his brother Ali, as well as to provide these 5 children with a safe environment of a loving, stable home. Their adaptation to the new living conditions was very difficult. It was also not easy for Zack and his brother Ali to establish communication with their new brothers and sisters. Because of these misunderstandings, conflicts constantly arose in the family. Zack's entire family worked on a farm, but the boy had a real talent, he was engaged in music. Therefore, his parents bought him a piano. He was indeed a master at playing the instrument, which was especially evident in high school. The teenager began to participate in music competitions and won first place at the Southeast Piano Festival. He achieved significant success, even performing a solo program with the South Carolina Philharmonic Orchestra. In 2010, Zack applied to the Juilliard School, which teaches piano at the highest level. The educational institution was located in New York. The boy was not only accepted there but was also immediately offered several degrees for his skill. With his ability, he surpassed all his classmates and became the only student from the USA chosen to participate in the International Music Festival in Kyoto. Besides him, only 11 people from all over the world took part in it. Those who knew Zack described him as a reliable friend with high moral principles and excellent communication skills. He perfectly fit the definition of a kind soul. The young man devoted his free time to supporting those in need, using his musical talent. He often gave free performances in rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, and hospitals to bring joy and comfort. By 2018, Zack entered East North Carolina University to obtain a master's degree in piano. During this period, he sought to help literally the whole world. Later, his desire was embodied in voluntary service in the U.S. Marine Corps. He applied to enter military educational institutions to become an officer. For a year, Zack mastered the intricacies of military service, but at the beginning of the second year of training, he suffered a fracture of both legs. Because of this injury, the young man was forced to interrupt his studies and give up obtaining an officer's rank. It was at this time that a woman contacted Zack, looking for a talented pianist for a church in the city of Greer, South Carolina. He agreed and immediately moved there, staying to perform on a permanent basis. As a reward for his work, the musician received half of the donations that parishioners brought to the church. At first, it was good money, but by mid-2020, due to the pandemic, the number of church visitors sharply decreased. The brilliant musician was forced to look for new sources of income. So he began to give solo performances in various locations of the city and state, as well as moonlighting in other ways. In addition, the pianist started his own blog, where he shared valuable piano lessons. For performances, he purchased the necessary electrical equipment, which provided him with the required mobility. Living and working in South Carolina, the talented musician met John Mello, the deceased's ex-husband, who had previously worked as a music producer. They quickly became friends. John helped him with performances and offered him a part-time job during the most difficult period of Zack's life. From mid-2020 to 2021, Zack helped him with household chores at home, actually performing the role of a domestic worker. This strengthened their friendship, and the musician became John's closest friend. Zack even became the only person John wished to see while in custody. Therefore, the police had many questions for the young man regarding his possible involvement in the murder of Christina Parcel. Could John have asked him for such a favor? Meanwhile, investigators examined surveillance camera footage that was found near the victim's home. In a neighboring house, there was a camera in the peephole of the door, thanks to which detectives were able to track all the events that took place outside the victim's house. On the day of her murder, the camera recorded a stranger dressed in dark clothes, with a hood hiding his face. He entered Christina's house around 10 a.m., and a few hours after the woman's arrival, the mysterious man left on a bicycle. This time his face on the recording was hidden by a mask. The deceased did not leave the house anymore, and no one came to her until the next day when the fiancé found Christina lifeless. This made it possible to finally exclude Bradley from the list of suspects in this case, although he still remained behind bars on other charges. Investigators suggested that it was this stranger in dark clothes, captured by the camera, who was the killer, but it was impossible to establish his identity. The face was covered, and no special signs were visible on the body. Then they requested recordings from surveillance cameras located along the path of the bicycle to track the suspect's further movements and began to study these recordings. This took a long time but yielded results. The bicycle was spotted in several recordings, including the moment when the stranger in black clothes was loading it into the back of his pickup truck. Due to the graininess of the image, the car's number could not be clearly seen, but the model, make, and color matched Zack's car. It seemed that the piano master was involved in the brutal massacre of the woman from the veterinary clinic. The police obtained a search warrant for the house where Zack lived. There, they indeed managed to find a bicycle identical to the one used by the perpetrator in dark clothing. Law enforcement officers seized the man's computer for inspection. With its help, it was established that there was active correspondence between John and Zack. In total, the police found over 1,700 text messages, most of which turned out to be encrypted. The men communicated, clearly encoding important information. In addition, some messages were generally a chaotic set of words. This was probably done on purpose to confuse the police if they suddenly got on their trail. In these messages, detectives found the following clues. On April 17, 2021, just 6 months before Christina's death, John asked Zack to follow his ex-wife. This message was not yet encrypted. And on the very day of the murder, John asked his friend how the musical performance went. To which he replied that everything was great. It seemed like an innocent question. However, the police found out that Zack did not perform anywhere that day. Therefore, they suggested that by performance John meant the murder of his ex-wife. As it turned out, all potentially important information on the young man's phone was encrypted or destroyed. In addition, he used an access code that was unknown to the police. This significantly complicated and prolonged the search for information. Moreover, it was not possible to obtain data on the location of the device at the time of the attack on Christina. The means of communication was constantly in airplane mode, including the period and the mysterious man in the mask came to Christina. It seemed that this was done on purpose to make it impossible to track Zack and link him to the crime scene. Despite this, based on the collected evidence, the officers obtained an arrest warrant for the young man. While law enforcement officials were working on bringing charges, Zack was invited on an international cruise to perform. So at the time of receiving the warrant, he was already in Europe. Detectives had to wait, but fortunately, by the time the charges were brought, Zack had already arrived in Michigan, not even suspecting that they were planning to arrest him. At that moment, The young man had every opportunity to easily leave the country. It was enough to cross the border with Canada or take the nearest flight and go on a ship on a cruise. However, as soon as Zack learned about the charges against him, he himself returned to South Carolina and surrendered to the police, as he was convinced of his innocence. This happened on November 3, 2021. The man hired a lawyer and stated his intention to challenge the slander that tarnishes his good name, because he did not commit anything illegal. However, Zack did not provide the police with access to his phone, so a petition was filed with the court. After that, an order for full access to the mobile phone was issued by a court order. The musician provided incorrect passwords several times, which only slowed down the investigation and significantly prolonged it. Finally, on April 8, 2023, after approximately 700,000 attempts, the smartphone was successfully unlocked. The police found important sources of information with correspondence between John and Zack about their encrypted plans to murder Christina. These correspondences were also planned to be used as evidence in the trial. But all this was indirect evidence that did not guarantee the outcome of the case. After all, Zack and John had an absolutely impeccable reputation, which could be confirmed by numerous witnesses. Previously, they had no criminal history, and the jury might not believe the correspondence and footage from cameras with a similar car. Stronger evidence was needed for a conviction, and it appeared. A forensic examination made it possible to detect the criminal's DNA under Christina's nails, which coincided with the DNA samples of the piano master. As a result, the police could confidently assert that it was Zack who attacked Christina in her home and brutally killed her. The defense, however, insisted that it was impossible to see the criminal's face on the surveillance camera recordings, and also to accurately identify the car. Therefore, the evidence was called indirect. As expected, the defenders emphasized that the musician had no problems with the law before. All acquaintances and friends spoke of him as a very kind person who was clearly not capable of committing a brutal bloody crime. Moreover, there was no obvious motive for attacking a woman. And the results of the DNA examination were not recognized by the lawyers at all, believing that the samples were either spoiled or falsified. In fact, from the very beginning of the process, when the general public learned that a famous musician could be imprisoned, dozens of letters from outraged people began to arrive at the court. Among them were former classmates and teachers of Zack, friends, and just ordinary citizens who did not even really know him but admired the pianist's talent. Among those who applied were also numerous employers of the young man from all over the world who were delighted with his skill. They all unanimously claimed that such a talented musician with a kind soul could not be a killer. The court received over 50 such letters. One interesting circumstance that indicated a rather close connection with John was a photograph of Zack. Oddly enough, finding himself in a prison cell, the ex-husband did not put a photo of his daughter or anyone else on the wall. He hung only one single photograph of the pianist. This looked very unusual. Lawyers emphasized that Zack never had even a hint of problems with the law. He served in the U.S. Army, where he went as a volunteer, and not as an ordinary soldier, but entered an educational institution to obtain an officer's rank. It was also used the fact that the young man had the opportunity to avoid any problems with the law by simply going on a cruise liner again, where he was invited. However, he voluntarily returned to his state and surrendered to the police as soon as he learned about the claims from the authorities. He knew about everything, including the warrants that the police were going to get to analyze the information. But this did not stop him because he knew about his innocence. The lawyer considered this the main proof of his innocence. Zack asked to release him on bail of $100,000. He wanted to be under house arrest in order to stay with his parents before the trial, in a calm atmosphere where he could play his favorite musical instrument. The pianist also agreed to avoid any contact with the family of the criminal and the victim. However, the court denied him bail, after which the musician was transferred to prison. He is awaiting trial behind bars, which is scheduled for 2024. The man still does not admit his guilt in the death of Christina Parcel. Meanwhile, John also rejects all accusations. Communicating with investigators, the man explained his decision to flee with his daughter. John reported that he took her to Italy because he was tired of litigation with his ex-wife. And most importantly, he was shocked when he learned about how his ex-wife Christina used their 9-year-old daughter to satisfy some indecent desires. Evidence emerged that Christina was also involved in this, as she was recorded in some photos with her daughter. Therefore, according to him, John took his daughter away from his inadequate wife. The man planned to gain custody of his daughter based on the explicit photos taken by the deceased's fiancée. And he had every chance of this. Christina could have completely lost custody. In that case, he had no motive or need to kill her. Nevertheless, John repeatedly expressed the opinion that he would fight for his daughter to the end, no matter what it cost him. However, he did not comment in any way on the connection with the talented musician. The prosecution believes that Zack is definitely involved because his DNA remained under the victim's nails when she resisted. Therefore, the pianist could be a participant in the conspiracy or a victim of John's manipulations. But there is another assumption: this crime, with the participation of a talented pianist, could have been committed because of his innate sense of justice, and John might not have known about the murder at all. Although their correspondence raises great doubts about this. In any case, the prosecutors will have to work a lot more, since the accused is indeed a law-abiding member of society, and dozens of people express support for him. Many new details are expected to be gleaned from Zack's mobile phone or from other sources, as the collection of evidence continues. But all this will be announced in 2024. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.